All right, let's get to the petroleum reserves here. So, read the article and heard the news that he is selling off 1 million gallons of gasoline. And they bragged that they're doing this right before the 4th of July weekend coming up here to lower gas prices. Okay. And my first thought is, well, listen, this is a strategic petroleum reserve. You shouldn't be using this to gain points and lower gas prices a little bit to gain some political points. But then I read that it was in the most recent spending bill, or one of the most recent spending bills, that president has to. It says here, under the complete of such sale, the Secretary of Energy shall carry out the closure of the Northeast gasoline supply reserve. What is going on here?
Well, interesting. At first, I've heard it was a spending bill, so that's news to me. But I can speak to it in this manner. I came into Congress in 2013. I'm the upper Gulf Coast of Texas. 4 coastal counties that start the Louisiana border and go down the coast. I'm 1/3 of the Texas coast. 7 ports, a lot of refining. We produce 65% of the nation's jet fuel, 80% of the nation's military-grade fuel, and 60% of the SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, is in our District 14. So we've watched this for a long time. In 2014, then Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz, was authorized to put 1 million barrel gasoline up in the Northeast. It's actually in 2 places, because you'd had Hurricane Sandy, and they actually got to taste some of what Texas gets, on a pretty regular basis. And so it was in there for that supply disruption in the case of a natural disaster, not because he wanted to lower in an election year. Him or anybody else wanted to lower gasoline prices. He's already decreased the size of SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, from about 740,000 barrels to right around 300,000 barrels. That's because they actually put some back in recently. And, if folks listen, and I know you guys are paying attention, and we're very, very grateful for that, what y'all do, drawing attention to it. Strategic is a strategic word. It's Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And it's made for things like, if we have a complete world, in 73, the Saudis taught us about oil embargo. It's made for a complete disruption in our supply. Well, since that time, after Congress authorized that or mandated that we could not export crude oil, and as you may know, in December of 2015, the omnibus, that's the only omnibus I ever voted for, was because it lifted the crude oil export ban, which helped us in Texas, helped America. We can now make more oil, make more gasoline, we could export more oil, and we can be energy independent, energy dominant. It's not designed, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, for the president to use to gain points during election year, but that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. About this Northeast Reserve, what year did you say that was created?
June 20th, 2014.
Okay, 2014. Why? And that's in South Portland, Maine, and Boston? Is that where they?
There's 2 locations of it, and I think you're right. New York, there's New York Harbor area and South Portland, Maine. So those are the 2 areas.
So why? It seems like he's not just selling off, or what's the right term? Selling off, is that the right word?
Well, no, it's buying boats is the right term.
Well, sure. That's right. 1 million gallons, but it's specifically from these 2 locations, right, which seems interesting as well. And it says here, upon the complete of such sale, the Secretary of Energy shall carry out the closure of the Northeast gasoline supply.
Yeah, well, that's because that's all there is. That's what Ernie Moniz got put in there, was 1 million barrels, if you will, 1 million barrels, and so once they get all 1 million out, then they're going to close it down. Well, that may be good for them buying boats, but think about it. What if New York or the upper Northeast does have another hurricane akin to Hurricane Sandy? I think it's short-sighted, but actually for them, well, it is short-sighted, and their sight is aimed at one date, November 5th.
Yeah, that's right. And then here's the rest of it. The government may not establish any new regional petroleum product reserve unless funding of the proposed regional petroleum reserve product reserve is explicitly requested in advance in an annual budget. So cannot do it again. So I'm totally with you, of course, with the buying votes now. but is there also like a Green New Deal environmental mindset here or something that we can't even, like, shouldn't we be having, we should be building way more reserves, like everywhere, all the time. Like, what are we talking about?
No question about it, and that's exactly right. It's the Green New Deal, and here's a newsflash, Mike. They hate fossil fuels. They hate fossil fuels. And it may and they're trying to even electrify, as you've probably heard, our military, a lot of the vehicles. But look, you can't power a tank with solar panels, batteries. You can't power a fighter jet with solar panel and batteries. Hate to tell them that. And we really need dependable gasoline vehicles. If you've watched the news since these guys took office, since this quest to kill the fossil fuel industry began, you see where up in the winter, Chicago, and very, very severe cold areas, batteries in electric vehicles lose their charge quickly. And we've had hurricanes in Texas where people are having to evacuate, long lines when a hurricane's coming, like Hurricane Ike, for example, in 2008, Hurricane Harvey in 2017. People get out there on the highway in an electric vehicle and waiting in long, long lines along the freeways trying to exit Houston area. And if their battery's not fully charged, if it's the third or fourth or fifth or whatever, that battery runs out while they're trying to get out of town. Electric vehicles cannot be the cure-all, end-all, save-all for America, and yet the crazy green left thinks they are.
Are you a fan of Donald Trump?
Yes, I am.
He said that he's going to be a dictator for a day, Congressman. But in that dictatorship for a day, he said he wants to drill. I'm sure you're happy about that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, when Biden went to Saudis overseas, I don't know, was it 2.5, 3 years ago, begging them to come out with more barrels of oil, we're saying, Mr. President, why don't you come to Texas and beg us to make more oil? Mike, and I think it's 2019, I've been talking to my staff about verifying these facts. If you took all the offshore leases, we're talking about federal leases, off the Gulf of Mexico into our waters, American waters, and onshore leases, land, federal drilling permits. If you took all of the on-land drilling we did in federal sites and offshore with federal permits, then the amount of oil that it produced would have, if it was a country, I think would have been like the 9th largest country in the world. That's how much oil we have at our fingertips, and yet they don't want it. He flies to Saudi Arabia and begs them to produce more oil. For me, the life. So if you hate fossil fuel, Mr. President, why are you asking anybody to produce more? It doesn't make sense.
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, the first thing he did was to end the Keystone Pipeline.
Are you ready for this? Keystone Pipeline comes into my district, 830,000 barrels of oil, Port Arthur, Texas. Mike, if you did the math, this is the cleanest, most efficient way to get oil into our area through a pipeline, right? If you did the math, the average 18-wheeler holds about I'm talking about tanker, holds about 7,000 gallons of oil or product, gasoline, could be milk or water, liquid, whatever, but 7,000 gallons of oil divided by a 50-gallon barrel, it's 120 barrels on an 18-wheeler, one 18-wheeler. To get to 830,000 barrels of product a day, you'd have to have somewhere around 5,300 18-wheelers on the highway every day to deliver that kind of product. Why they won't let it come to Texas, why they hate pipelines. You know, I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We're working on pipeline, on a permit reform right now, not just pipeline, but in many other directions. Trying to see, because we can move product around in our country more efficiently, safer, and cleaner than any other country in the world. And yet this administration and our friends across the aisle, quite frankly, the Democrats on the Energy and Commerce Committee, they've put the big red flag up. No to streamlining permitting. Mike, we talk to people about coming into our district with a new refinery or with a new LNG plant, and they tell us it takes longer to get the permit for that plant, the permitting process through that plant. It could be 5 and 6 or more years than it does to build a 1.2 or 2.4 billion with a B dollar plant. Might take a couple of years to build the plant. Think of the thousands and thousands and thousands of workers that come in to build it. And think of the jobs that it builds, the state property tax that those plants pay for school districts, for counties, for cities. and all of those things, it takes longer to get the permit for those than it does to actually build the plant. And yet, our friends on the left, they are beside themselves because we want to shorten the permit process. So more jobs, more energy, less disruption in supply chain, and the Democrats' hair is on fire.